Hello and welcome to this special post-national episode of Steelfur Speaks with me, of course, Steelfur, wearing my lovely team jersey in my hotel room just after the event has finished, for me at least. The top 8 is going to start in about 20 minutes and I'm going to be watching it on stream. So let's just go over a quick takeaway. So I finished 16th, which is obviously a reasonably good performance. I'm quite happy with it. There were one or two mistakes I'm not happy with as a player, but I had some good games. I had some not good games. I played a very aggressive deck, which I'll be talking about next week. I'm not going to get too into that now, though it has made up a significant part of the field and also is making up a significant part of the cut, which will be worth talking about next week. And that's, of course, Lightning Briar. Zero cost, go again, whatever. I call it Briar deck wins myself, but there's a lot of different names kicking around for it. Basically, the idea is you're running 54 cards that cost nothing, and the other ones that do cost 1 draw you a card, so just use those, it's good. And then you just put out as much damage as you can and use the embodiment tokens to block as much as you can. It blocks really well, it does more aggro than Katsu, it made a very good reason to switch from Katsu. But I don't really want to get into that, so we'll do a deck tech on that next week or so. I know people want to take it to their own nationals and people are going to be watching it like a hawk. I'm not really sure yet what deck beats it. It just seems to go wide really, really well. Bravo struggles against it quite a lot. There is an Ice Lexi deck list that is kicking around there that does actually put some problems into it, so we'll see how that happens. It can also have a bit of a rough game into Dash as well, if Dash gets there. It gets their equipment early, so that's an interesting potential option for people. So we'll kind of see how this shapes up and who wins the actual tournament, but that Lightning Briar list is good. I took it from Chris Hinagashi at the Calling. Other people, I think a couple of weeks ago, sent me another version of Lightning Briar, but it wasn't tuned very well, so I tried it a few times. I was like, I'm not really feeling this, and I didn't test it anymore. I focused more on Earth, Briar, and Katsu, which obviously was my mistake, because if I had focused on that deck 3 weeks ago, maybe I could have been the one coming out with it, instead of just switching to it after I saw the meta at the Calling. But what can you do? I wanted to do this video. I kind of wanted to sort of give my hot sort of initial takeaways while I'm still filled with the energy of the event, about the event structure. There's been a lot of talk this weekend about the people on the ground. I think this is kind of important about the event structure and whether we thought it went well. The general consensus from a lot of people I've talked to is that doing the draft in the middle of the CC was a really bad idea. It wasn't an organizational problem. We didn't have to take a break. We took like a 10-minute break for them to get the packs, but they had enough of a team that they just got the packs, got us to sit down, and we drafted. That was fine. We just went to our table, we got the pod. Sorry, my phone is shaking a little bit. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that it really, really messed up the Swiss rankings of everyone involved, right? So the easiest way to break this down is if you're all the 3-0 pod, right? Normally, if you lose a game there, you have a chance to be paired up against someone who was not 3-0 in the last round. You have a chance to be paired up against someone who was 1-1 in the last round and won their game, right? So you're a 2-1 and you're being paired up against a 2-1 who was a 1-1. You have a chance to be paired up against them because the way that Gem does the software is random. However, in this format, all the 3-0s are essentially put into a room and fight until they're out of, one is on 6-0 and the other is on 3-3. So it drastically culls down that number. Now that is fine. That is fine. 3-0s playing 3-0s, one of them ending up on a low score. That is genuinely okay. However, where it gets very, very kind of sketchy is in the draft pods that are not consistently made up of people on the same score. So in my draft pod, which was the second pod down for all the 2-1s and some of the 3-0s, because remember we drafted, at the point when we drafted, there was still 3-0, there was still more than 8 3-0s. So there was 3-0s in the pod with 2-1s. So you could go 3-0, and this did happen to a friend of mine, not do very well in the draft, and then basically if you can... No, I've skipped a bit here, sorry. The pairings in the draft, however, were done within your pod, but based on your Swiss ranking, okay? So that means that if I am on 2-1 and I win my first game in the draft, because I've drafted well, and then my opponent, someone is on 3-0 and loses their first game in the draft, they get paired up against me because we're on the same Swiss ranking and not someone else who has lost a game in the draft. Now, what that means and how that differs from normal drafting is that if you draft badly, you are overly punished for losing that game, because not only do you because you still get paired up against someone who won a game in the draft, right? You see the problem there? So we had people on 3-0 who lost a game in the draft because their draft deck was the equivalent to a deck that can maybe go 1-2 or 2-1 in a draft, getting paired up against someone with a winning record in the draft, and then losing a second game when if they had been paired up against someone else who lost in the draft, they potentially might have won that game. And that was a massive problem. And this problem is actually thoroughly eliminated by just drafting first, and I really don't understand why we didn't draft first. Random pods, random distribution, etc. The other thing I will say about the drafts, and I think this is really important, after playing more and more, regardless of what James White says or LSS says, I genuinely think that Tales of Aria is a bad draft set, okay? I feel like it fails to accomplish its goals, and I feel like what has happened here is that the developers of the game draft at quite a high level internally, and they've designed a draft set that is perfect when everyone is playing on the same level, okay? And that's fine. That is good. That achieves one thing, but it's like that board game. It's like Game of Thrones or Twilight Imperium, where if you have 6 people who are on the same level and everyone is playing really strategically and really smartly, then you have this optimal set, right? Where every person is making the right strategic decisions and you have a really equal game. When really what we have is the Game of Thrones game, where 5 players are really good and 1 player is really bad and just messes up the thing for all the other 5 by making one of the other 5 really, really strong, right? If you saw the infographic coming out of UK Nationals, you would have seen that there were 32 Old Hymns, 28 Lexis, 28 Briars and 25 Lexis, right? In the day 1 draft hero choices. What you won't see is that a lot of the pods skewed 5 heroes of one, two of another, one of another. A lot of the pods skewed 5 heroes, 6 heroes of one. We had some pods that were 6 Briars, 1 Oldhim, 1 Lexi. Guess who won? I have decided, I mean, people can disagree with me, but from my understanding is that Aria is actually a bad set for signaling in draft, right? It is possible for you as a player to draft Ice and Earth cards, be going Oldhim, and not take any Guardian cards, right? So someone could be getting past like really, really, really good Guardian cards, still be seeing Ice cards or Earth cards from the element that you're not drafting, so say you're to the right of them, and think Oldhim is open, and think that you're taking the Earth cards for Runeblade, right? And it's really hard for that person then to see that you're also taking Oldhim up until the point where you start taking Oldhim class cards in Pack 2 or late in Pack 1. So therefore, it's actually really, really hard to read the signals in the draft. And I think that's why we keep getting these draft pods that are even heavily skewed. So even my draft pod in the top 16 draft pod, so the 8 to 16 draft pod, we had 5 Oldhim, 2 Briars and 1 Lexi. Guess who went 0-3? It was the 1 Lexi, right? And the reason that happened is that I got the perfect signals to go Oldhim. I picked up an Autumn's Touch, Pack 1, Pick 1. I went then in for a some other Earth card. I think it was no, I went in for a Winter's Grass Blue because that was a block 3, and then I went in for and then I got past the Turn Timber, right? So Pack 3, a Turn Timber, yellow. So obviously I took the Turn Timber yellow, and then I got past 2 Sow Unders or Snow Unders or whatever, and then I got past another Turn Timber. So at this point I'm like, okay, maybe I should probably take Oldhim. I'm getting the Oldhim signals. There's still plenty of Earth cards going around, or an Ice cards going around. So I'm probably not playing against other Oldhims to my right at least. And so I read the signals correctly. I went Oldhim. I could have also gone Briar, which would have obviously been a better choice. But I ended up passing the Briar cards and just taking the Oldhim cards. What happened then at the latter end of Pack 2 and at the early side of Pack, at the latter end of Pack 1, at the early side of Pack 2, was that all of the people, so the person to my right was actually drafting Oldhim as well and sending very bad signals. He basically pivoted to taking all of the Oldhim cards, and then the only thing left in the pack was Lexi cards, right? But I was too deep into Guardian at this point and Earth to switch to Lexi, and the Briar cards were already going, so I couldn't actually switch to Lexi because I had too many Earth cards. So it didn't make sense for me to change, but someone else at the table should have pivoted away. So there were 2 other Oldhims who had a lot of Earth cards, and not as many class cards, because I had been taking them, who should have pivoted away to Lexi, right? Then maybe they had ice cards. There was one guy with a lot of ice cards and not a lot of Guardian cards who should have pivoted away to Lexi, right? And that didn't happen, right? And the reason that I keep saying that I don't think this set is actually very good is because of that difficulty in draft. And that's not just based on my experience. If we look at the drafts that have happened in the past 3 weeks, and it is still quite a new set, but even then, this keeps happening. And we're talking about good players who've practiced draft a lot and have repeatedly drafted this set and other sets. And we see a problem that we didn't see with the other sets, the Welcome to Wraith sets, whereby with the 4 heroes in the set, it was a lot easier to figure out what was closed and what was open in terms of what class cards were left in the packs, right? You know, in some ways, Aria is great because it leaves you open for longer, but on the other ways, it's bad because it's harder to read the signals that are coming to you from your opponents because there are less signals. They're obfuscated by the fact that there's lots of rare, elemental, and class cards. And if someone takes a Majestic or a Rare as their first pick, you have no way of knowing what they're on. You really have to just wait and bide your time and draft a lot of different elemental cards. But to be honest, the problem again with Flesh and Blood is if you do that, you know, look, for example, so think about the heroes that win in this format, Oldhim, Briar. You know, if you do that, you risk getting fatigued by Oldhim because he has a 35 card deck and you have a 30 card deck. That was one my strategy was to take Oldhim as soon as I got some good signals that Oldhim was open, because even if I end up with a 35 card Oldhim block, I can fatigue people with some defense reactions, which I got fairly early on. Obviously, that didn't pay off. So my actual takeaway after all of this is I actually am starting to think that Aria is not a very good draft set. I would be interested in hearing other people's opinions. On Sealed, I am firmly of the opinion that Aria is a terrible Sealed set. I really don't understand how it got to where it is, but equally I would be, I'm really just on the fence on Aria altogether, to be honest. Like the constructed heroes, we're seeing a lot of Lexi and Briar come together, but Briar Lightning seems to be terribly balanced. Lexi seems to really struggle with her base mechanics and Oldhim is too slow. So the constructed balance is not really great. The draft balance is not good either because it's a bad set for signaling and it's if there's 2 Briars in your pool, they will probably win. You really need the set really needs people to get that split of heroes between the 3 heroes for one of them not to just be overpowered and win. And it's very easy if the signals are read wrong because you've locked into a class for one person to get an overpowered draft and win. And the Sealed is atrocious. I mean, you have Sealed events with an 80%, sorry, just an itchy ear, an 80%, that's annoying. You have an 80% Briar in a representation rate in the Pro Quest that was just happening or something like that. And the decks that were winning, my friend got a Crown of Seeds and a really good Oldhim pool, so he can actually block Arcane, but he still gets steamrolled by a God Briar pool, a really good Briar pool. You literally can't stop that much Arcane damage, right? So you're kind of just there. You're there basically just looking at Briar as this demon in Sealed, which is not balanced in any way because of the amount of unblockable damage she can do, sometimes more than your life total, happily dealing 20 arcane damage through the course of a game. And all of that arcane damage coming from attacks gives her the ability to block. So Sealed isn't balanced at all. Briar is completely dominating that. You have draft where it's really hard to get signals, so lots of people are making mistakes even at top tables at callings or recently the nationals that just happened. And then you have constructed where one of the heroes literally draws when people play him in tournaments. Another one of the heroes can just die to not getting arrows at the right time and bad things happening. And the third one is Lightning Briar, Briar, Earth Briar is all right. Lightning Briar just seems like it's overtuned and really broken. So it'll be interesting to see if a deck evolves to counter Lightning Briar. My initial impressions are that hero is going to need some tweaking. I don't know what card you ban. The only card that's a 9 of in the deck is Plunder Run. You could get rid of that. You could get rid of Ball Lightning. But it doesn't fix the Sealed problem. I genuinely think Aria is not a good set for Sealed tournaments. I really, if I play a Sealed tournament, I will play Briar probably, regardless of whatever my pool is, as long as it's somewhat good at Briar, and I'll just lose to the people with a better Briar pool. that's kind of my takeaways from the day. I really didn't like the format with the draft in the middle of the Swiss. I think that was a mistake. I had a good time regardless. I didn't want my CC concentration. I was 2-1 in CC. I just lost a close game, and then I went undefeated in the draft. That's fine, but I didn't want my CC concentration broken up by the draft, and a few other people have said that as well. So it's kind of like, why are we doing it in this order when we should just get the draft out of the way straight away and not have that problem? And then, of course, the drafting just not being of very high quality. And part of the reason for that is there was no drafting part of an RTN. There was no draft practice within RTN. It was all constructed. You basically had a store. The store had an impetus to organize a draft night, but 10 people show up to a draft. That's not good draft practice. You really needed some form of drafting at the RTNs or in draft pods at the RTNs to get actual draft practice in at a competitive level, and that didn't happen, which is why in my pod, I talked to one of my opponents, I said, why did you go old him? You couldn't have been seeing that many good cards because the person to your right was also taking old him. And he said, I find old him very comfortable as a hero, so I just thought I'll take all the old him cards and play whatever happens, which obviously, is the thing you can do, but it's not what you should be doing. If you've had enough draft practice, you should play any of the heroes fairly easily. Yeah, so that's it. I'll finish up this video. Just coming up in 20 minutes, and I want to go downstairs, have a beer, and watch the finals. Just to say, there's been a lot of problems with judging at this tournament. I think LSS does need to watch it. Part of it is attributed just to the fact that, obviously, because the game is new in the UK, the judges are also new to judging in the UK. It's hard to find judges because everyone wants to play. So people who volunteered have been taken on, even if they haven't got a lot of judging experience. And not everyone is on the same level, that's fine. The game needs time to develop good judges as well as good players. I will say, however, I personally have been a bit disappointed by the lack of, we'll say, interaction with, issues during the stream game. I think if you're streaming games, you should put your best active judge on that stream table who's going to catch all of those problems. We've seen a lot of pushback from the stream with people making mistakes on stream. But also, I feel like if someone's starting to make repeated mistakes on stream, that person needs to have a word or more than a warning. I don't know what to say to you. We've had a case, and I know the guy who did this, so I don't want to go too crazy into it. But if a guy has tried to trigger his Teklo Foundry Heart without boosting 4 times, right, when he's been playing this deck and practicing with it for a couple months, then we really have to ask what's going on there. And we kind of really also have to ask, what more can be done from a judging standpoint to incentivize him to pay more attention to his abilities, right? A lot of these judge penalties aren't necessarily there to punish or remove someone from a tournament unless they're being threatening to their opponents or creating a negative play experience. A lot of them are designed to be a punishment to remind you that in the future you need to play cleaner. And we've had a lot of instances here where someone will have made a mistake and they're not having a penalty applied to them, but this is a competitive level event. If you trigger a weapon attacks a second time, or if you something like that, or if you trigger an ability where you don't have the requisite of things, when do we start awarding IP2 penalties? Is it only in the top cut? Is it in the top 24? Is it in the Swiss with 88 people? At what point do we start punishing people for their mistakes, right? And, we were told this morning at the top 24 that we were going to be held to a higher standard, but we've already heard stories through the day of people making those same sort of mistakes on the stream or at the top tables, and no penalties have been applied as far as I know. And maybe I'm wrong on that front, but I haven't heard about any penalties being applied. So at what point in the tournament do we actually start holding people accountable to their mistakes? And I think that's a big question that LSS and the judging team here and other Road to Nationals, other nationals need to address, is at what point do actual penalties start being applied? Anyway, I'm going to leave you there. Thanks for listening. I hope you found this interesting. Obviously, during the next week, I'm going to be doing a bit more of a breakdown as to the decks lists when they come out from this event, the other deck I played, and all these kind of things. I had a really great weekend. It is not over yet. We are going out for a giant leg of roast lamb at an Indian restaurant in a couple of hours. We're going to go and have some beers. We're going to watch the stream. Not actually going home until tomorrow, and I have tomorrow off as well, so I'm feeling really great. And also, I'm going to go and cheer for my friends because of my testing group. I think 3 or 4 of us have made it into the finals. You can see our team shirts here. We're really proud to be part of the same team. And I'm really happy for them to get in. So I finished on 16th. That is the end of my weekend. I'm not going to be playing any more Flesh and Blood today. I have friends in the ProQuest final. I have friends in the top 8 here. Really psyched for all of them. It's going to be fantastic. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoy watching the stream as well.